Wizards of the Coast has just released its new banned and restricted announcement, and man, there are a lot of angry Magic players. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. This is an eventful banned and restricted and unbanning notice. There's a bunch of cards that are getting banned. There's a suspension, there's a card getting unbanned, there's all kinds of stuff going on. And with one particular format, people are very, very angry with this announcement. So we're gonna go through all of the different formats that the bannings are in, talk about all that, and then we'll cover what it is that is making people feel so frustrated. And I don't believe it's unreasonable for them to be frustrated. So first of all, we'll list off the cards and what's happening with them, and then we'll dive into the announcement about each particular format. So, starting out with Historic, we've got Agent of Treachery being banned. It's leaving suspended into banned. Winota is leaving suspended into banned, and Fires of Invention is leaving suspended into banned. If you're not familiar with the suspended concept, this is only being used on Magic Arena. So, instead of outright banning a card, they are putting it on suspension, where they go, is this card able to come back anytime soon? Or, is this something we permanently need to ban? So basically, it's like, instead of a ban, it's a timeout. For like 2 or 3 months, they go, okay, you cool your jets over there, and we'll decide if we're going to let you back in the game or if you've got to hit the road. So, Agent of Treachery, Winota, and Fires of Invention were previously suspended. Who could have predicted that cards like Fires of Invention would be a problem? Oh wait, yeah, I did a video detailing very much how this would happen. Pretty obvious. So, we've got next up for Historic, Nexus of Fate is banned. Another card somebody I know said was a real problem. Oh, this guy right here. Some of these are so obvious that yes, I pointed out in videos they're going to be a problem, but people at the time were like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, really? 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 Anyhow, so you've got those 4 banned. Agent of Treachery, Winota, Fires, and Nexus all getting the boot. Now, Nexus was already banned in best of 1, and now they're going to extend that to best of 3 as far as I understand. But Burning Tree Emissary is not getting banned, but it is being put on the suspension list. So there's 5 cards affected in Historic. 4 of them are full on bans. 1 is just a suspension. With the Burning Tree Emissary, I mean, it does have some nice mana generation abilities. We're gonna, you know what? Let's take a look at we'll do it. What we'll do is we'll talk about the cards that are being banned for each group, and then we'll talk about that group. So Historic, the logic behind the bannings are, and this is written by Jay Parker, which they felt the need to note. Oh, I guess that's because the article it's like co-written by Ian Duke and Jay Parker, the Historic part. This is Jay Parker's words here, all right? So, we currently have 3 cards suspended in Historic. Winota, Agent of Treachery, and Fires of Invention. As with all suspensions, we've been carefully watching how the changes affected the Historic meta, and our data is showing it to distinct improvements with those cards removed. Okay, that's weird wording. Each of these are also cards that will tend to get more problematic as the format grows in breadth and power, either as key ways to easily access very powerful effects, or as one of those powerful top-end pieces. Who would have thought that 2 of the 3 cards that just let you get a bunch of stuff for free would be a problem? It's almost like Magic uses casting costs as a balancing mechanism, and when you throw that away and go, you know what, you don't have to cast the guys, in fact, put them into play straight, and they can just attack whenever, like, oh, we'll give them indestructible. Who would have thought that'd be a problem? Anyways, it says, because we feel the data shows a positive impact from the current suspensions, and because it's unlikely to be safe to reintroduce these cards to Historic anytime soon, Winota, Agent, and Fires are banned in Historic. Players will be receiving wild cards as normal for these bans, per the policy announced earlier. So, if you don't know how this works, now, when it comes to bannings, they do the bannings immediately in paper and immediately in MTGO. And for some very odd reason, most of the bannings take a place on Arena a few days later. So this actually gives you a window. If you have an Arena account, go and use your wildcards to get 4 copies of Agent of Treachery, Fires of Invention, and Winota Joiner of Forces. You will literally get all of those wild cards redeemed to you, and on the off chance that you want to use these cards in a format where they're allowed, like Brawl, or in direct challenges, you can still use these cards, or new formats may come along where you can use them. Either way, all of that on top of protecting you when you're opening booster packs from never getting these cards at the end and instead just getting gems. So if you have the wild cards, there's no logical reason not to purchase all these cards, because you will indeed just have those wild cards returned to you. So it makes them free even if they're not technically usable right now. And you know what I mean? Like, well, you can still use Fires in Standard, can't you? Or did they ban? I can't even remember. Did Fires already get axed in Standard? Either way, just spend the wild cards. That's what I'm trying to say. To continue with what says in the article here, though these suspensions now bans improve the metagame, the top end of Historic is still becoming too constricted. Shortly after the suspension of Winota, the top 2 decks comprised roughly 15% of best of 3 play, showing a healthy, diverse spread of decks. Now the top 2 decks are roughly 35%, and the rate of concentration is increasing. It's interesting to note that we'll get percentages here from Jay, which is great, but in the rest of the information we're going to get, we're not going to get as much information. So I do like how we're getting a little more open information, and we'll talk about the information problems with these ban announcements when we're done going through all this. So, over the last months, decks using Nexus of Fate have risen dramatically in terms of metagame share, and it's now Historic's most played deck. Surprise! The 2 main cards enabling this deck are Wilderness Reclamation, yet another card that is incredibly strong. Like, that Wilderness Reclamation's pretty powerful. I can't say for sure if it needs the axe, but it feels like it's a good candidate for it. So, the 2 cards enabling the deck are Wilderness Reclamation and Nexus of Fate. While Wilderness Reclamation is a powerful card, we're not seeing it appear in problematic decks in Historic aside from this one. Give it time, we will. This deck also runs multiple ways to accelerate to early cast Nexus of Fate, and those options will only expand with the format. Finally, Wilderness Reclamation acts primarily to give players access to a wider array of lines of play, while Nexus of Fate acts to prevent the opponent from playing at all. Very true. From both a long-term health and gameplay standpoint, we feel that Nexus of Fate is the better card to act on here. Yes, I felt like Nexus of Fate has been a problem from the day they announced it. Nexus of Fate is a card we've been watching closely for a long time in Historic. While it's very powerful, we had hoped that traditional Historic would be a place where it could remain a balanced option for its fans. While this held true for a long time, with the deck showing strong but within bounds play and win rates, it's now risen to a level where it's starving out other options and warping the format around itself. Nexus of Fate is much like the cards discussed above, where its power will only grow as the Historic card pool expands. And we're going to see more and more stuff like this. Remember, R&D has changed its design philosophy to the Fire philosophy, which is like, make it fun and exciting and inventive and whatever, but in balance, there's no B in Fire, all right? Balance ain't a part of it. So we're going to see more of this happen as time progresses, and more bans are going to be required for the out of whack power levels they are putting on particular cards, right? So, because we don't see a good opportunity to safely reintroduce Nexus of Fate to the format soon, Nexus of Fate is banned in Historic, all right? So the other deck that's long been a powerhouse is in Historic, is Gruul Aggro. While it's been the most played deck often, the separation between it and the other top decks has widened significantly in the last month. Gruul and Nexus are now played more than 3 times as much as their closest competition in Best of 3, and Gruul is one of the highest win rates in both Best of 3 and Best of 1. After considering the deck and the surrounding meta, we feel like the best card to act on here is Burning Tree Emissary. While the explosive start it enables are a factor in the deck's rise, its removal should leave the deck with ample power to remain competitive, just at a more balanced level with more aggressive options. It's true, because Burning Tree Emissary is essentially like a free card, right? Because you cast it and it replaces itself with mana, so you just get an extra body on the board. It's solid. Unlike Nexus of Fate, we do see a strong possibility that the Historic meta could shift in a way that allows Burning Tree Emissary to find balance, a balanced fun home. However, as the meta stands today, the power it brings to Gruul Aggro is overall reducing the number of balanced, interesting, and varied deck options in the format. For this reason, Burning Tree Emissary is suspended in Historic. This feels like probably one of the best suspensions And in that, I mean, it should have been very obvious that Winota was going to just need to be banned outright. Winota doesn't feel like a card where you're just going to be like, oh, well, you know what, all of a sudden getting to play, like, getting to dig really deep into your deck and grab out extra creatures that can come into play attacking for free and be indestructible. Like, that's obvious that's going to continue to be a problem. But the Burning Tree Emissary is only a problem when it's accelerating one of like the absolute best decks in the meta. So this feels like a card that could actually come off the suspended list. So it feels like a good choice and the first really good use of suspensions that, in my opinion, that we've seen so far. So it says, basically, unlike Nexus of Fate, we do see a strong possibility that it could shift in a way that allows it to come back. But obviously, at the power level it's at right now, it needs to be suspended in Historic. One final note on Historic suspensions. When we first introduced the mechanism in December, we emphasized the limited time nature of suspension by linking it to the periodic availability of Ranked Historic. Now that Ranked Historic is always available, that no longer works as a good boundary marker. Despite that, we will be adhering to the general timeline it imposed, and any suspension will be resolved via unsuspending or banning the affected cards within roughly the same 2 to 3 month span. We will always act more quickly when we feel the data is clear. Come on, Winota. But this will act as an outer bound. Suspension is a temporary measure to ensure the balance changes are playing out well, and it will not be used for any long-term action. I do like the suspending concept. Now, moving into Pioneer, where we have no bannings. In fact, we have an unbanning of Oath of Nissa. Since the launch of Pioneer late last year, we've seen significant changes in the metagame. Early in Pioneer's launch window, various green ramp decks were among the most popular and successful archetypes. In order to reduce the consistency of these decks, Oath of Nissa was added to the banned list early in the progression of Pioneer. Since that time, other cards used by green ramp have been banned, including Once Upon a Time, Veil of Summer, and Oko Thief of Crowns. All brand new cards, surprise, surprise. In addition, the release of new sets has added power to other archetypes and generally expanded possibilities for deck building. The metagame is now in a place where we feel that unbanning Oath of Nissa is a reasonable step to take as far as adding some power back to the Nykthos Shrine to Nyx ramp decks and other archetypes that revolve around key creatures, lands, or planeswalkers. We're otherwise generally happy with the shape of the metagame in Pioneer, with the most played decks each having strength and weaknesses against each other. We're keeping an eye on the populations of combo decks in the environment, although the perception that combo decks have dominant win rates isn't backed up by Magic Online play data. We're also seeing a variety of lesser played decks having success, which indicates that the metagame may continue to shift. Now we're going to put a pin in this and return to this one. So all you need to know is that Oath of Nissa has been unbanned in Pioneer, and we'll move on to talking about Modern. All right? So Modern is basically Arkham's Astrolabe, or if you would watch the video where I talked about potential bannings, I called it something very humorous in that video that I'm not going to repeat here. So, over the past several months of Modern's metagame, we've seen a rise in the popularity and win rate of multicolored decks using Arkham's Astrolabe, with some variants approaching 55% non-mirror match win rate. While these decks have taken on several different forms, their common game plan is using Arkham's Astrolabe to play powerful cards across several colors. As a result, the Astrolabe has become one of the most played cards in Modern. While there's nothing intrinsically bad about multicolored good stuff decks having a place in the metagame, their power and flexibility is usually counterbalanced by making concessions in their mana bases, often through lands that enter the battlefield taps, cost life, or involve some other deck building restriction. The Astrolabe makes this trade-off come at too low of a cost, as one Astrolabe can often mean excellent mana for the rest of the game without costing a card. In addition, Astrolabe leads to other synergy by virtue of being a cheap artifact permanent, and it can be blinked or recurred for card advantage. In short, Astrolabe adds too much to these decks for too little cost, resulting in win rates that are unhealthy and unsustainable for the metagame. Therefore, Astrolabe is banned in Modern. We're keeping an eye on Arkham's Astrolabe in Legacy for similar reasons, although at present the play rates and win rates of it don't warrant action. We're aware of concerns among the Legacy community on this point, but want to be consistent with our philosophy of only resorting to bans when a card or deck reaches problematic win rates that can't be solved by natural metagame forces. And then the Pauper ban, I mean, I feel like the Astrolabe, they covered it very well. I don't have much to add to that one, obviously it needed to go. Now, Pauper has also seen bannings. We're getting 2 cards banned in Pauper, Expedition Map and Mystic Sanctuary. So, with Pauper, it says, with last year's bans of Gush, Gitaxian Probe, and Daze in Pauper, I noticed a potential concern in the weakening of blue tempo decks could create a rise in the popularity of Tron decks. While we didn't immediately see a problematic metagame shift in the direction, Tron decks have remained steadily popular and strong, sometimes nearing 25% of the field among top finishing decks in Magic Online paper tournaments. This trend, in combination with community feedback, has prompted us to take a look at the role of Tron decks in the Pauper metagame. While it can be a good thing for metagame diversity to have archetype that plays differently from many other strategies, we're seeing some negative effects in terms of repetitive gameplay, recursive play patterns, and lock states. This puts pressure on other decks to be able to deal with such game states or else race the Tron decks, and generally restricts deck building space. Trying to race a Tron deck is a very difficult race indeed. I mean, Tron decks literally produce 7 mana with 3 lands. That is a huge hurdle to overcome. It says, therefore, we're taking the step of banning Expedition Map in order to reduce the consistency and popularity of Tron decks in the metagame. Expedition Map lets you fetch up one of the Tron lands, obviously making it easier to assemble the Tron and go crazy mana! And then it says, second, multiple archetypes have recently adopted Mystic Sanctuary as another means of creating repetitive loops or lockout states. While decks often only play a couple copies of Mystic Sanctuary, it's proving to be another key contributor of negative pressure on the metagame by enabling endgame loops. As a card that's likely to continue causing problems down the road, we're choosing also to ban Mystic Sanctuary and Pauper. Our intent is that this combination of bans should considerably reduce the speed and consistency with which Tron decks assemble their mana engine and eventual loop or lock states, as well as reducing the amount of repetitive gameplay coming from various blue-based tempo decks. So, a Mystic Sanctuary to me feels like it's different than Winota. Winota is an example of a card that's so overpowered that they need to bring balance to the game. Mystic Sanctuary, when you look at it from a standard perspective, doesn't feel unbalanced and broken. It feels fine in standard. It's just a card that obviously can impact other formats in a negative style. So that's the kind of card where I don't feel like they made a mistake making the card the same way I do with Agent of Treachery, Winota, Fires of Invention. Those are all genuine mistakes and should never have been made. Same with the Nexus, all that stuff. But Mystic Sanctuary is an example of a new card they've created that necessitated a banning in an older format. Or, yeah, I mean, Pauper is an older format. It's also, whatever, you can use everything in Pauper. Regardless, it's an example of a card where it's fine. It's not unbalanced for standard, but kicking it in Pauper makes perfect sense. Now, they do have a note on standard where we have zero bans going on. It says, after a careful review of the metagame, we're choosing not to make any changes to standard at this time. Players Tour Online 3 and 4 saw the overall win rates and day 2 conversion rates of the most played decks, Bant Ramp and Timur Reclamation, come down to healthier levels. In the weeks following, we've seen other archetypes rise in popularity and win rate, including Mono Green Aggro, Rakdos Sacrifice, Mono Black Aggro, our Red-White Pawblade, Simic Flash, and others. Core Set 2021 has brought a variety of new tools, and generally we're seeing steady motion in the metagame leading up to the Player Tours final. While we agree with concerns that Growth Spiral ramp decks, don't you guys mean Uro ramp decks? Are you going, you know what, we don't want to do anything to our most expensive standard mythic that's come out in Theros, so it's Growth Spiral. It's that dirty Growth Spiral. That's the problem, guys. That's the real problem card we need to be paying attention to. Come on. So, it says, while we agree with concerns that Growth Spiral ramp decks in aggregate have recently represented a larger than ideal portion of the metagame, we do see different archetypes within that larger category behaving differently in terms of strengths, weaknesses, and roles in the metagame, with signs of the metagame shifting away from ramp in recent weeks. The release of Core Set 2021 and standard with rotation coming in the fall, we've decided to allow the metagame to continue its natural evolution. Read this as, we know there's a problem, but unfortunately that involves big expensive cards that we do not want to ban. It's interesting how with particular formats they're willing to give us information and then other formats, they're not willing to give us information. You know what I mean? Like, if you look at Arena, it's like, oh, check it out, 25% of this and whatever. And then you look at things like Standard, and it's like, we're seeing a healthier than normal amount of these things. Like, Wizards has intentionally taken steps to choke off the information that we have so that we don't know, ideally, how many copies of each card are being played, what the most popular cards are. Like, that changes our experience of playing the game. It's because if we see the numbers and they're open with us 100% about their decision making and go, these are the vectors that we use to determine what needs to be banned, then when something they don't want to ban because of the cash value of it and how much it helps push sales needs to be banned because of the statistical data, they can't, if they've been honest with us and shown us the data, they can't go, oh, well, no, we apply that philosophy and everything but the case of expensive mythic rares that are pushing the set. So, no, the rules don't apply for those. So they've intentionally squashed information that we just don't get to see. You'll see the same thing with Pioneer, which, by the way, is where everybody's getting really, really angry. In Pioneer, they're giving us no information. There's no percentages, no statistics. We don't get to know any of that. And literally talking about, it says, we're keeping an eye on the population of combo decks in the environment, although the perception that combo decks have dominant win rates isn't backed up by Magic Online play data. They don't show us this data though, right? They don't give us percentages. They don't show us this data. They just go, oh, combo decks aren't a problem because of this data that we're just not going to share with you. There's no reason not to share it with you. Companies keeping certain information. Oh, sorry, my throat is, I'm dying here. Hold on. Companies choosing to keep information secret that is like, oh, these are trade secrets. We need this so our competitors don't get it, or one thing. This is open information that we should be provided about the formats that we play. So they're not telling us what's going on, but there's a massive outcry about people who are really, really angry that combo decks, specifically the really difficult to interact with inverter deck, where it basically just goes, I'll put my deck into my graveyard. Now I'll play this card that says, if I can't draw any cards, I win. There's nothing you can do about it, short of having a counterspell at the exact right moment. You can't destroy these permanents to survive. It's fast, it's effective, it's difficult, and most importantly, it's unfun. And that's something they're not paying enough attention to with this. The number of people who are genuinely unhappy because Pioneer is super unfun because of these combo decks. So it's making a ton of people angry. If you go and look around on the posts under the bannings on like Reddit, Twitter, things like that, the majority of the rage is over Pioneer, and it's actually justified in this case. It feels like Wizards isn't doing enough to manage Pioneer properly. This format's in its infancy. People can't go and play it physically in most cases. MTGO is the only place we can get any data, and you won't share it with us, but you'll tell us, no, you know what, it's fine, we're just going to unban the Oath of Nissa because there's absolutely nothing wrong with these combo decks that are ruining the format. So I understand the aggravation of the people who are frustrated by this. It definitely feels reasonable to be frustrated by this. Now, overall, mostly, I agree with what they're doing here. The Pioneer one is the one where I'm like, I don't think you guys are doing a great job. But, and I mean, Standard, Euro, there's another one where it's like, come on, guys, come on. But you want to give it a little bit more time, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? All right, so let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, man, like, subscribe, comment, share the video around. Sharing the video actually helps way more than I thought it would. So yeah, totally. Do all that good stuff. And if you love what I do here, hop on my Patreon where the most amazing people on the planet are listed and scroll by on the screen. Thanks for coming by, everybody. I'll see y'all soon. Bye.